Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, Story 14.
You know, usually when you play a video game and you hit a game over, there's this comforting expectation of a clean reset.
Right, yeah, like a blank slate.
Exactly. You hit the button, the screen fades to black, and the world just goes back to normal. I mean, you might lose your high-level gear, sure, but you also lose the baggage.
Yeah, the consequences are gone.
Right. All the bad decisions, the wasted resources, the wrong turns, they're all wiped clean. You get to start completely fresh.
And, the psychology behind that is really powerful. We inherently crave that idea of absolution.
Oh, for sure.
The concept that our accumulated mistakes can simply be erased, it allows us to try again without being totally crushed by the weight of our past failures. A true clean slate is almost a prerequisite for moving forward.
Which brings us to a rather terrifying thought experiment for you today.
Yeah, this is a dark one.
Imagine a glitch in that system, a glitch where you are forced to restart the game on the absolute lowest, most brutal difficulty setting, but, and here's the kicker, you get to keep all your save file data.
You remember everything.
You remember absolutely everything. Every high-level perk you used to enjoy, every comfortable moment of luxury, and crucially, every terrible, selfish mistake that got you killed in the first place.
It's a nightmare scenario, really.
It is. We are looking at a fascinating supernatural narrative titled Three Lives, or San Sheng, from the classic 17th century Chinese collection, Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio.
A really remarkable piece of literature.
Yeah, and our mission today is to pull this apart. We're exploring this text not just as a spooky ghost story, but as a darkly comedic, profound philosophical inquiry into karma.
Right, and the psychological burden of memory.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and how experiencing life from the absolute bottom of the food chain drastically shifts your perspective.
The author, Pu Songling, crafted something brilliant here. He basically asks you to put yourself in this unimaginable position. Just imagine having total, pristine recall of every moral failing you've ever committed while consciously having to endure the universe's punishment for those exact failings.
It's not just suffering.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
You aren't just suffering. You know exactly why you deserve it.
So let's look at how the story actually sets up this dynamic. Our protagonist is a man named Mr. Liu. In his present life, he's a scholar and a gentleman.
Right, a respected guy.
But he possesses this terrifying superpower. He remembers absolutely everything about his past incarnations. And that includes his time navigating the bureaucracy of hell.
Which is such a specific and interesting detail.
Yeah, the narrative just drops us right into the aftermath of Liu's first past life. He was a very wealthy official. He committed a lifetime's worth of corrupt and cruel deeds, and he finally died at the age of 62.
And, we have to talk about the portrayal of the underworld here.
Yeah.
In 17th century Chinese folklore, it's fundamentally different from Western conceptions of fire and brimstone.
It's not all pitchforks and lava.
No, it functions exactly like an earthly bureaucracy. There are magistrates, endless paperwork, waiting rooms, and very rigid hierarchies.
I love that. Death by paperwork.
Exactly. And because Liu was a gentleman of high status in the living world, the administrative systems of hell initially default to treating him with the deference his earthly title demands. When he meets Yama, the king of hell, it plays out like a meeting between visiting dignitaries.
It honestly feels like a VIP lounge in the afterlife. They sit down, they are offered tea.
Very civilized.
But Liu is incredibly observant. He notices that Yama's tea is crystal clear, like mountain spring water.
Right.
His own tea, however, the cup placed directly in front of him, is thick, cloudy, and described in the text as being like glue.
Yeah, very unappetizing visual.
And Liu's instincts just kick in. He suspects this is the legendary soup of forgetfulness.
Which is the draft designed to wipe a soul's memory entirely clean before they face judgment and reincarnation. It's essentially the mechanism that allows the universe to reset the board.
Right. So Liu, being this cunning, privileged guy who is totally used to playing the system, decides he simply isn't going to drink it.
He finds a workaround.
He does. He waits for Yama to look away, and he secretly pours this cloudy, glue-like tea onto the corner of the table, basically pretending he finished it.
It's such a brazen move.
It reminds me of like a powerful CEO walking into a regulatory audit. The auditors are so intimidated by his status that they leave the room for 5 minutes, and he quietly shreds the most damning document on the table.
That is a perfect analogy.
He exploits the deference the system gives him to just completely bypass its rules.
But the mechanics of that bypass are exactly what doom him. Liu uses his earthly privilege to circumvent spiritual justice. But by preserving his memory, he inadvertently curses himself.
Totally.
He guarantees that whatever punishment comes next, he will experience it not as a dumb beast, but with a fully intact, hyper-aware human consciousness. He essentially sabotages his own cosmic anesthesia.
And the audit eventually catches up. The polite tea party shatters the very moment Yama actually checks Lu's bureaucratic record of deeds.
The paperwork always gets you.
Always. The King of Hell sees all the terrible things Lu did during his 62 years on Earth, and that VIP treatment just evaporates instantly.
Yama is furious.
Furious. And he sentences Lu to become a horse.
And demons drag him away immediately. The transition is brutal and vividly described in the text. He's forced toward a house with an impossibly high threshold.
And when he hesitates, the demons just beat him until he falls over in agonizing pain.
Right, and when the disorientation fades, he hears human voices announcing that a black horse has just given birth to a male foal.
He's in a stable, trapped in an animal body, but his mind is entirely human.
Which is just horrifying.
It is. He has to drink from the mother horse just to survive the intense hunger. He spends 4 or 5 years growing up living in this constant terror of the whip.
But the text focuses on a very specific, almost mundane detail about his suffering here.
Yeah, which is where the philosophical core of the story really reveals itself.
Right, it's the distinction between how the master rides him versus how the servants ride him.
Exactly. When the master of the estate rides Lu, it's actually tolerable. The master uses proper equipment, thick saddle flaps, and mudguards, and he rides at a slow, leisurely pace.
He treats the horse like a valuable asset.
Right. But the unbearable agony comes entirely from the servants. They don't use saddles, they ride him bareback, and they clamp their ankles and legs incredibly tightly against Lu's ribs to hold on.
Yeah, the text explicitly states that this specific pain pierces the heart.
I find this distinction absolutely fascinating. The ultimate torture for Lu isn't a deliberate, malicious punishment from the official master wielding a whip. It's the careless, everyday negligence of the servants.
Because the author is illustrating the mechanics of systemic cruelty. Casual thoughtlessness often inflicts far more pain than deliberate, targeted malice.
Right.
Just consider the dynamics at play here. The master has the luxury of time and proper equipment. The servants are likely rushed, underpaid, and, pressured to complete tasks quickly.
They aren't trying to torture the horse.
Exactly. They simply don't view the horse as a sentient being capable of suffering. To them, it's just a tool to get from point A to point B.
Think about how we interact with the invisible labor in our own modern systems, like the delivery driver rushing to meet an algorithm's deadline or the customer service rep fielding angry calls.
Oh, absolutely. The people at the bottom of a hierarchy often bear the brunt of systemic friction.
And Lu, with his human mind, is experiencing what it feels like to be reduced to an unfeeling object for someone else's convenience. That realization is far more agonizing than the physical clamping of the legs.
It completely shatters his ego. Experiencing that level of disregard drives him to an extreme reaction.
He decides to rebel. He gets so enraged by the agony of the bareback riders that he goes on a hunger strike. He refuses to eat, and he starves himself to death after 3 days. He essentially tries to rage quit his own punishment.
This is a very human response to an unjust earthly system, right? A physical rebellion. But the underworld operates on a completely different cosmic physics.
You can't stripe against karma.
No, you cannot stage a protest against karma. By starving himself, he actually commits the sin of suicide, actively avoiding the sentence handed down by the divine bureaucracy.
Which just makes things worse. Yama is absolutely livid that Lu found another loophole by dying early. So Lu's soul is hauled back to hell. He is literally flayed of his horse skin, and Yama condemns him to be a dog.
A huge demotion.
Yeah, and Lu is so desperate to avoid this that he tries to run away and throws himself off a cliff to die before the punishment can even begin.
But he wakes up at the bottom of a hole, being licked by a mother dog.
This incarnation plunges Lu into an incredibly severe psychological crisis. He is now a dog, bound by the biological imperatives of a canine, but he still retains his aristocratic human memories and logic.
And this leads to what is probably the most visceral, unsettling concept in the entire narrative.
Oh, it's an absolute sensory paradox.
Right. Lu's human brain logically knows that excrement is filthy, diseased, and disgusting. But his physical dog body, his olfactory senses, are sending signals to his brain that it smells incredibly fragrant and delicious.
It's so gross. He is experiencing biological reality and human morality simultaneously, and they are completely at war.
It creates a profound cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
It literally threatens to break his sanity.
I mean, imagine being trapped in a twisted VR simulation where your avatar's physical instincts override your logical brain.
That's a great way to put it.
It's like being on a strict diet, and you smell a freshly baked, warm donut. Your mouth is watering, your body is screaming at you to eat it, but your logical brain knows with absolute certainty that the donut is made out of actual garbage.
Right, and that is the daily, minute-by-minute reality Lou is living. He has to use sheer, exhausting human willpower every single day just to resist eating filth.
The exhaustion must be unbearable.
The exhaustion is key here, because as your physical senses dictate one reality and your intellect dictates another, who are you?
You're torn in half.
Exactly. The ego cannot sustain that kind of division forever. Lou spends a year living in this constant state of disgust and fury. He's desperate to escape this body.
But his strategy has to evolve. He remembers the flaying. He knows that starving himself to death will only invite a worse wrath from Yama.
Right. He realizes he cannot commit suicide again.
But he realizes he can manipulate the actors within the system. His master keeps him well-fed and has absolutely no intention of killing him. So Lou deliberately walks up to his master and bites a massive chunk of flesh right out of the man's thigh.
It's so calculated.
He knows with absolute certainty that this specific, horrific act will provoke the master into beating him to death.
He basically orchestrates his own execution. It's murder by proxy. He uses the master's predictable human rage as a weapon against himself, technically keeping his own paws clean of suicide.
The master is furious, beats the dog to death, and Lou escapes the canine body. But orchestrating your own death to avoid cosmic punishment is still manipulating the system. The divine bureaucracy is not amused by the secondary loophole.
Yama is appalled. Lou's constant defiance and manipulation of the rules earn him a swift and brutal reprisal before the next formal reincarnation even begins.
Yeah, he is whipped hundreds of times and locked in a pitch-dark room.
But Lou's survival instinct kicks in. He finds a tiny hole in the roof, squeezes through it, and drops down into tall grass.
And he looks at himself and realizes he has fallen even further down the karmic ladder. He is now a snake.
A creature entirely bound to the earth, lacking limbs, traditionally associated with deceit or lowliness.
But Lee's mindset undergoes a radical transformation here.
He's absolutely terrified.
Completely terrified. He's been a horse ridden to exhaustion, a dog fighting its own nature, and he has been tortured between lives. He is desperate not to commit another sin.
So, as a snake, which is an apex predator for its size, he takes a vow of extreme pacifism.
He refuses to eat any living creatures. No mice, no bugs. He survives entirely by eating berries and nuts he finds in the grass.
He's starving his biological nature without starving his actual body. But he's still trapped in this profound ethical dilemma.
Right. He desperately wants to die to end the cycle, but he cannot violate the rules of karma again.
If he starves himself, that's active suicide, and that's a sin. If he bites a human to provoke them into killing him, he's deliberately harming others to serve his own ends, and that's also a sin.
So finally, he's hiding in the grass, and he hears a heavy cart coming down the dirt road. He waits for the exact, perfect moment, slithers out into the middle of the road, and allows the wheels of the cart to cleanly cut him in half.
But if we look deeper than the legal loophole, the transformation is real.
You think so?
I do. He finally learned how to navigate his existence without causing suffering to others. His time as a snake was marked by a complete refusal to harm any living thing, even when his own survival demanded it.
That is a monumental philosophical shift from the wealthy official who exploited everyone around him.
And that shift is recognized by the system.
When Lu's soul returns to hell, cut in half, Yama is shocked that he's back so quickly. Yama demands an explanation, and Lu essentially submits his legal defense. He crawls forward and explains that he sought his own death without committing a single sin against another living creature.
Yama reviews the case and realizes Lu has fundamentally learned the lesson. He is so impressed by this perfect adherence to the spirit of the law that he forgives Lu.
He declares the cycle of animal punishments complete and allows him to be reborn as a human.
Which brings us full circle to the Mr. Lu of the present day, the man dictating this entire story.
The guy who kept all his save file data?
Yes. Because he retained his memories the entire time, he's born with a photographic memory for history, literature, and statecraft. The text mentions he easily passes his imperial exams in the Xinyu year.
The imperial exam system is crucial context here, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
In dynastic China, these exams were essentially the ultimate bottleneck for social mobility and political power. They required decades of grueling rote memorization of classic texts.
So Liu essentially walked into the hardest test on Earth with the answer key already locked in his brain.
Exactly. Passing the exam instantly restores him to the very top of the social and political hierarchy.
He is a wealthy, powerful official once again, but his worldview has been inverted. And this is where the dark humor of the story really shines for me.
It is pretty funny.
After traversing the agonizing depths of hell, after experiencing the visceral horror of multiple animal reincarnations, and wrestling with the deepest mechanisms of cosmic justice, his profound wisdom to the world is basically a very passionate Yelp review about horse saddles.
It seems almost absurdly narrow, doesn't it?
It really does. He constantly goes around telling everyone he meets, like, look, if you're going to ride a horse, you absolutely must use thick saddle flaps. Because let me tell you, getting squeezed by a rider's bare legs hurts infinitely worse than being struck by a whip.
On the surface, it sounds like a man traumatized by a very specific phobia. But if we examine the author's concluding commentary, Pu Songling reveals a profound societal warning hidden inside that mundane advice.
Yeah, the author notes that nobles might have animalistic souls. Pu Songling uses this beautiful metaphor here to explain the mechanics of power.
Right, about the roots and the flowers.
Exactly. He says that when a poor person does a good deed, it's like planting a new flower. It's beautiful, but it's small and fragile. But when the rich and powerful do good deeds, it's like nurturing an existing massive root system.
It lasts longer, it reaches deeper into the earth, and it yields a massively greater impact on the entire ecosystem.
Because the powerful have the infrastructure to actually change systems. The author's warning is directed squarely at the elite class reading this text.
If those in power fail to show empathy, if they treat those beneath them with the casual, hurried cruelty of a bareback rider, they will inevitably face the exact same karmic justice.
They will eventually pull the salt cart as a horse, eat filth as a dog, or wear scales as a snake.
The story uses this wild, supernatural framework of reincarnation to force empathy onto those who hold absolute power.
It illustrates that the only way to truly understand the daily friction and suffering of those beneath you in the hierarchy is to literally walk or trot or slither a mile in their shoes.
It's an extreme cosmic exercise in forced perspective. Liu had to be stripped of his voice and forced to experience the absolute bottom of the food chain to understand the weight of his actions at the top. The saddle is just a metaphor for creating systems that protect the vulnerable from the friction of the powerful.